The Wildlife Park, Part 1, Introduction. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the Johnson family was excited. They had been planning a visit to the Wildlife Park for weeks, and today was the day. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, along with their two children, Emily and Jack, packed their bags with snacks, water bottles, and a camera. They couldn't wait to see all the animals up close. The journey begins. The Wildlife Park was about an hour's drive from their home. As they drove, the children talked excitedly about the animals they wanted to see. Emily, who was 10 years old, loved elephants. She had read many books about them and knew a lot of facts. Jack, who was 7, was eager to see the lions. He thought they were the kings of the jungle. As they got closer to the park, the scenery began to change. The tall buildings and busy streets were left behind. Now there were more trees, fields, and even some small hills. The road was quieter, and they could hear birds singing outside. Arriving at the park. When they finally arrived at the Wildlife Park, the parking lot was already half full. Many families had come to spend the day there. The Johnson family quickly found a spot to park and grabbed their bags. The entrance to the park was large and welcoming, with a big sign that said "Welcome to the Wildlife Park." At the entrance, they bought tickets and a map of the park. The map showed different areas for different animals, like the elephant area, the lion area, and even a special bird sanctuary. The park was very big, so they had a lot to explore. The elephant area. The first place they decided to visit was the elephant area, because Emily was so excited to see them. As they walked through the park, they saw many beautiful trees and plants. It felt like they were in a different world, far from the city. When they reached the elephant area, Emily's eyes grew wide. There, right in front of them, were 3 huge elephants. One of them was playing with water, spraying it from its trunk, while the others were eating leaves from a tree. The elephants were much bigger than Emily had imagined. A park guide was nearby, talking to a group of people. The Johnson family joined the group to listen. The guide explained that these elephants were from Africa and that they loved to eat grass, leaves, and fruits. The guide also told them that elephants are very social animals and live in groups called herds. Emily was fascinated. She took out her notebook and started writing down everything she heard. The lion area. Next, they made their way to the lion area, which Jack was very eager to see. As they walked, they passed by other animals like zebras and giraffes. Jack kept asking his parents, "Are we close to the lions yet?" When they finally arrived, they saw a big, open area with rocks and trees. At first, they couldn't see the lions. They were hiding in the shade, trying to stay cool in the hot sun. But after a few minutes, one of the lions stood up and walked toward the water to drink. The lion was strong and powerful, with a big mane around its head. Jack was amazed. He had never seen a lion in real life before. Another lion soon joined the first one, and they both sat down near the water, relaxing. The park guide told them that lions are very good hunters and that they work together when they hunt for food. Jack thought the lions were very cool. The bird sanctuary. After seeing the lions, the family decided to take a break and have some snacks. They found a nice spot with benches and sat down to eat. As they were eating, they looked at the map to decide where to go next. Mrs. Johnson suggested visiting the bird sanctuary, a special area where many different kinds of birds lived. The bird sanctuary was not too far away, so they finished their snacks and headed in that direction. When they arrived, they were greeted by the sound of birds chirping and singing. The sanctuary was full of colorful birds of all sizes. There were parrots, flamingos, peacocks, and many more. The birds were flying freely in a large, open space that looked like a tropical forest. Some of the birds were sitting on branches, while others were walking on the ground. Emily and Jack enjoyed watching the birds' bright colors and listening to their songs. A park guide explained that some of these birds were rare and came from faraway places like South America and Africa. Exploring more of the park. After spending some time in the bird sanctuary, the Johnson family continued exploring the park. They saw many other animals, like monkeys swinging from tree to tree, a family of kangaroos hopping around, and even a sleepy bear resting under a tree. The park was full of life, and there was something new to see around every corner. As the day went on, they realized there were still many parts of the park they hadn't seen yet. The children were getting tired, and the sun was starting to set. Mr. Johnson suggested they start heading back toward the entrance, but they promised the kids they could come back another time to explore the rest of the park. Heading home. On the way back to the entrance, the family talked about their favorite parts of the day. Emily loved seeing the elephants, while Jack couldn't stop talking about the lions. Mrs. Johnson enjoyed the peaceful bird sanctuary, and Mr. Johnson was happy to see his family having such a good time. When they finally reached the car, the children were tired but happy. They climbed into the back seat and quickly fell asleep as their parents drove home. It had been a long, exciting day at the wildlife park, and they couldn't wait to come back again soon, to be continued in Part 2. The Wildlife Park, Part 2, A Plan to Return. The Johnson family had such an amazing time at the wildlife park that they couldn't stop talking about it. Over the next few days, Emily and Jack kept asking their parents when they could go back. Mrs. Johnson suggested that they return the following weekend, but this time they would arrive earlier so they could see all the areas they missed on their first visit. Mr. Johnson agreed, and they all started planning their next trip. They decided to make a list of the animals they wanted to see and the activities they wanted to do. Emily was excited to visit the reptile house, while Jack wanted to see the hippos and rhinos. Mrs. Johnson was looking forward to the butterfly garden, and Mr. Johnson was interested in the special night safari the park offered. The return trip. The following Saturday, the family woke up early, just as planned. They packed their bags with snacks, water, and their camera once again. This time, they were even more prepared with comfortable shoes and hats to protect them from the sun. The drive to the park was smooth, and the kids chatted excitedly in the back seat, eager to explore the areas they hadn't seen yet. When they arrived at the wildlife park, they were among the first visitors. The air was cool and fresh, and the park looked even more beautiful in the early morning light. The family bought their tickets and quickly reviewed their plan for the day. They decided to start with the reptile house, as it was closest to the entrance. The reptile house. The reptile house was a large, dark building with a sign that read Reptile Kingdom. Inside, it was cool and slightly dim, with the sounds of trickling water and the occasional hiss or croak. Emily and Jack were both a little nervous, but also very curious. The first exhibit they visited was a large tank that housed a giant python. The snake was curled up on a branch, its scales shining under the light. A park guide was nearby, explaining that this python was one of the longest snakes in the world, growing up to 30 feet long. Emily and Jack were amazed. They had never seen such a big snake before. As they continued through the reptile house, they saw many different kinds of reptiles, including colorful lizards, poisonous frogs, and a massive crocodile. The crocodile was lying still in the water, only its eyes visible above the surface. Jack thought it looked like a log until it suddenly moved, causing everyone nearby to jump back in surprise. The guide explained that crocodiles are very good hunters, using their powerful jaws to catch their prey. Jack was fascinated by the crocodile and asked the guide lots of questions. Emily, on the other hand, was more interested in the turtles and tortoises. She loved how slow and steady they were, moving carefully through their habitats. The hippo and rhino area. After spending time in the reptile house, the family decided to visit the hippo and rhino area. The hippos were in a large, muddy enclosure with a big pool of water in the middle. When they arrived, two hippos were in the water, only their eyes and ears visible above the surface. The guide explained that hippos spend most of their time in the water to stay cool, but they are actually very dangerous animals, especially when they feel threatened. As they watched, one of the hippos slowly climbed out of the water. It was enormous, with thick, gray skin and huge teeth. Jack couldn't believe how big it was. The hippo opened its mouth wide, showing off its large teeth, and let out a loud bellow. The sound echoed through the park, making everyone nearby stop and watch. Next to the hippo area was the rhino enclosure. The rhinos were also very large, with thick, tough skin and a horn on their noses. They looked powerful and strong. The guide told them that rhinos are herbivores, meaning they only eat plants, but they can be very aggressive if they feel threatened. The Johnson family watched in awe as the rhinos moved slowly around their enclosure, eating grass and leaves. The Butterfly Garden. After seeing the hippos and rhinos, the family took a short break to rest and have some snacks. They found a quiet spot under a tree and enjoyed their food while talking about all the amazing animals they had seen so far. Mrs. Johnson then suggested visiting the Butterfly Garden next. The Butterfly Garden was a peaceful, enclosed space filled with flowers, trees, and, of course, butterflies. The air was warm and humid, and the garden was alive with color. Butterflies of all sizes and colors fluttered around, landing on flowers, leaves, and even on the visitors. Emily and Jack were delighted. They walked slowly through the garden, trying not to scare the butterflies. Emily was thrilled when a bright blue butterfly landed on her shoulder. She stood very still, watching it closely. Jack was busy trying to count how many different kinds of butterflies he could see. The guide in the garden explained that butterflies are important pollinators, helping plants to grow by carrying pollen from one flower to another. The children listened carefully, learning about the life cycle of butterflies, from eggs to caterpillars, and finally to beautiful butterflies. It was a magical experience, and Mrs. Johnson loved every moment of it. The night safari. As the day went on, the family continued to explore the park, visiting more animals and enjoying the beautiful scenery. They saw zebras, antelopes, and even a group of flamingos standing gracefully in a pond. But the highlight of the day was still to come: the night safari. The night safari was a special tour that started after the sun had set. The park had special vehicles that took visitors through the park to see the animals that were active at night. The Johnson family had never done anything like this before, and they were very excited. As the sun began to set, the park staff handed out small flashlights to the visitors. They all climbed into the open-air vehicle, and the guide explained the rules. They had to stay quiet, keep their flashlights low, and listen carefully to the sounds of the night. The night safari was a completely different experience from the daytime visit. The park was dark and quiet, with only the sounds of crickets, owls, and the occasional rustle of leaves. The guide used a special light to point out animals that were hiding in the shadows. They saw nocturnal animals like owls, bats, and even a few foxes. But the most exciting part was when they spotted a family of leopards resting in a tree. The guide explained that leopards are excellent climbers and often rest in trees to stay safe from other predators. The leopards were beautiful, with their spotted coats blending perfectly with the leaves and branches. The Johnson family watched in silence, amazed by how close they were to these wild animals. It was a moment they would never forget. The journey home. After the night safari, the family returned to the main area of the park. The day had been long, but it was filled with so many wonderful experiences. They were tired, but very happy. As they walked back to their car, the children talked about their favorite parts of the day. Emily loved the reptile house, especially the giant python, while Jack couldn't stop talking about the hippos and the leopards they saw on the night safari. Mrs. Johnson was still thinking about the peaceful butterfly garden, and Mr. Johnson was glad they had done the night safari. As they drove home, the children soon fell asleep in the back seat, dreaming of the animals they had seen. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson smiled at each other, knowing they had created wonderful memories for their family. The wildlife park had been an incredible adventure, and they knew they would return again someday to explore even more. Conclusion: the visit to the wildlife park was an unforgettable experience for the Johnson family. They had learned so much about animals, nature, and the importance of preserving wildlife. The park was a place where they could connect with the natural world and understand the beauty and diversity of life on Earth. The adventure didn't end there, though. The Johnson family continued to visit the wildlife park regularly, discovering new animals and activities each time. They also became more interested in protecting the environment and helping to preserve the habitats of the animals they loved so much. Through their visits to the wildlife park, the Johnson family grew closer, shared many laughs and moments of awe, and built memories that would last a lifetime. It was more than just a day out. It was a journey into the wonders of the natural world, and it inspired them to care more deeply for the earth and all its creatures.